In Quang Province in 1969, the jungle didn't throw sound back at you. It swallowed it, and every snapped twig felt like it vanished into wet leaves and returned as dread. A 6-man U.S. Marines Force Recon element, callsign Raven 2, had been living under green darkness for 2 days on a brief that looked clean on paper. Slip in silent, confirm traffic along a suspected NVA supply, cut through locals called the Suture Trail, mark the pattern, and slip out before sunrise, put a name to their footprints. They were meant to be ghosts with radios. Instead, at 0317, a booby trap made them real. A pressure device, rusted tin, string, a cheap Chinese detonator, popped beneath the heel of their point man, and the blast wasn't the kind that tore you apart. It was the kind that announced you to everything living within half a kilometer. The jungle didn't echo the bang. It made it worse by letting it hang like a warning. Corporal Evan Holbrook went down hard with shrapnel in his calf and a ringing that turned his face pale. He tried to stand and couldn't. Within minutes, movement began where there shouldn't have been any. No charging, no yelling, just bodies repositioning with the discipline of men who had done this before. On the handset, faint Vietnamese chatter rose and fell in short bursts, and their radio man, Lance Corporal Doyle, caught fragments that tightened his throat. American, West Slope, boxed them. By mid-afternoon, they weren't being followed, they were being shaped. Rifle fire tapped them from the north, then the east, and a third pressure point appeared behind them like a closing hand. They tried to shift downslope and found the brush too thick, the ground too soft, the angles wrong, and then the weather turned. The monsoon didn't arrive politely. It arrived like a door kicked open, rain sheeting down until the world became a gray tunnel and the canopy drank the sky. Visibility died, and any chance of air cover died with it. Raven 2 counted what they had left. 6 men, 1 badly wounded, another with a torn shoulder from the initial blast, 2 of them down to a magazine and change, no smoke, no flares, their extraction window already gone, and the radio hiss telling them the foliage was strangling signal. Their team leader, Staff Sergeant Mark Stitch Madsen, didn't do speeches, he did math. Perimeter, trip lines, claymores on likely paths, nobody fires unless you see a target. They were trained for quick cuts, knife work and vanish, not for sitting in a shrinking ring while an unseen force measured them. Private First Class Reyes swallowed and muttered almost to himself, "They're not pushing, they're enjoying it," and Madsen didn't correct him because it felt true. At 2:10, the jungle went still in a way that wasn't natural. Even the insects quieted as if something moved through that made them listen. Then far to the west came a single sharp crack. Neither the ripping bark of an AK nor the flatter pop of their own rifles, but cleaner and smaller and controlled. A suppressed shot. A beat later, there was a soft, heavy impact, a body hitting mud. Doyle and Reyes looked at each other. Madsen raised a fist, scanning darkness the rain kept repainting, and another suppressed shot followed, slightly closer, then nothing. No screams, no shout of alarm, just a gap in the enemy's rhythm like a drumbeat missed. Reyes whispered, "That wasn't us," and Madsen didn't answer, because for the first time since the trap, he felt something else in the night. Not hope, not rescue, but presence. 2 kilometers away, above a shallow ridgeline lined with bamboo, a 4-man Australian SASR patrol lay like shadows pinned to earth. They'd inserted 3 nights earlier, helicopter skids barely kissing a narrow LZ known only to their troop, and a pilot who didn't talk, on orders that were simple and cruel. Find the spur line feeding the Suture Trail, count bodies and packs in the hours between columns, leave no sign, return with a map drawn from Patience. Their patrol commander, Sergeant Lachlan Blue Rourke, carried a radio because someone insisted but trusted ground more than transmissions. His scout, Corporal Smokey Payne, trusted ground like language and could tell how many men passed by, how ferns leaned after rain. Their signaler, Terry Sparks Henderson, kept the set wrapped and muted, listening only at dawn and dusk. That night, just before first light, Henderson heard something that didn't belong. A faint American voice on an emergency frequency, clipped and strained, no coordinates, no call for artillery, just breath and urgency like someone speaking with teeth clenched. Boxed, low ammo, 1 down. Rourke didn't move for a long moment, then signaled, and the patrol flowed into readiness without a word. They didn't sprint toward the sound, and they didn't play heroes. They read the jungle until it told them what was true. Payne found the trail within 10 minutes. American boots, 6 sets, shifting direction too often. Classic recon movement broken by pressure, and behind it heavier spacing, more disciplined, a wide crescent of NVA tracks spreading to choke escape routes. Not a chase, Payne mouthed. A pen. Rourke traced contour lines on a damp map with a finger. If the Americans drifted east, they'd be funneled into a shallow bowl with high brush on 3 sides, an ambush that didn't need explosives to be final. Rourke tapped his suppressed rifle and pointed toward the enemy's left edge, where slick ground and thick undergrowth could hide movement. Payne's mouth twitched in something that wasn't quite a smile. Let's spoil their geometry. By 0430, the Australians were threading the enemy lattice, not charging into it but slipping between positions like smoke. And they didn't kill everyone, they killed nodes. A flank observer, a runner, a man with a radio pack. One suppressed shot, a pause, a shift, and they let confusion bloom. They nudged a tripwire half a hand's breadth so it would catch the wrong ankle, pressed a boot print into mud at an angle that suggested threat elsewhere, scraped a stone to sound like movement on the opposite side. The NVA were good and patient, but patience turns brittle when the rules change. Down in the bowl, Raven 2 felt it as a pattern break. Less controlled whispers, more urgent murmurs, movement that sounded uncertain. At 0620, an NVA squad leader hissed orders near a vine-choked stump, irritated by the silence of a flank element. He expected a report and got nothing. Then another man failed to answer. No gunfight and no alarm, just absence. He sent 5 to check the edge. 3 returned, one clutching his shoulder where something cut him clean, another pale and wide-eyed speaking too fast. Foreign soldiers, not Americans, not locals, they are... And he stopped searching for a word. They are not there. The commander didn't believe in ghosts, but believed in losing control. He tightened the ring and pushed his men closer, and that was the mistake. High on the ridge, Rourke watched the crescent compress until men crowded into each other's lines of fire, checked his watch, nodded, and Henderson keyed his mic once in low power. Directional. Kookaburra. A single word, a simple code, and Rourke fired a string of mines they planted in a shallow arc along the enemy's left shoulder. Not enough to flatten the jungle, enough to cut a seam. The blast didn't roar so much as tear, shrapnel hissing through wet leaves. Men shouted once, then fell silent as discipline tried to reassert and failed. Payne fired twice, dropping the radio man who lifted his handset. Henderson shifted antenna, listening for the frequency that went dead. Down below, Raven 2 felt the jungle change like a door swinging open, and Madsen didn't ask who it was because there was no time. "That's our gap," he said. "Move, now." They didn't run in panic. They moved like trained violins. Short bounds, covering fire in clean bursts, grenades tossed only when distance and angle promised effect. Reyes threw one into a thicket that had been spitting rounds at them all night. The explosion was muffled by rain and earth, and the gunfire from that patch stopped. Holt, pale and sweating, was dragged upright by Doyle and another Marine, boots sliding in mud. He bit down on a strap and kept moving. The NVA tried to pivot and fold around the gap, but turning to face a threat they couldn't see exposed them to one they could. Rourke's patrol never joined Raven 2 directly. They didn't need to, shaping the fight like hands shaping wire. Payne dropped a man the moment he raised his rifle toward the Americans' escape line. Rourke shifted by meters to remain where the enemy expected nothing. Henderson listened to frantic chatter and quietly killed cohesion whenever it tried to form. Then the NVA attempted to regroup around a fallen tree that served as a natural barrier, and Rourke had anticipated it. A second daisy chain set fired in sequence. 5 quick punches into mud and bodies, followed immediately by 3 precise rifle shots that sounded like distant tapping. When it ended, there wasn't a firefight, just less enemy. For the first time that day, the NVA weren't hunting, they were trying to leave. By 0730, the encirclement was fragments, small groups moving without direction, dragging wounded, glancing back into trees like the trees had teeth. And Madsen knew what that meant. The window was open, but not for long. Reinforcements could arrive the moment a message got through. He keyed his handset, voice low, clipped, battery light flickering. Raven 2 breaking north. "If you're out there, keep the door open." He didn't expect an answer, but Henderson replied anyway in a whisper through static, "Doors open. Keep moving." Madsen exhaled once, not relief, focus, and Raven 2 pushed toward a clearing marked as barely usable, an ugly rectangle of churned mud and bent grass that could take a helicopter if the pilot had nerve. Behind them, the Australians shifted laterally, setting quick ugly traps along likely pursuit lines, a mine where a man would step cutting a corner, a firing lane that forced hesitation. At 0802, a pursuing rearguard, 8 NVA, stubborn and shaken, picked up the Americans' trail and didn't get far. A stuttering chain of explosions rolled through brush like distant thunder. Then one final suppressed shot ended the last movement. Payne again, always the quiet finish. The clearing appeared like a miracle that smelled like rot, sunlight spearing down in pale shafts through canopy as steam rose from everything, and rotor sound arrived before the aircraft, thump becoming the familiar whoop-whoop of a Huey forcing itself into a hole in the world. Madsen popped green smoke. It curled upward and was immediately smeared by rain and rotor wash. Doyle and Reyes took knee positions, firing only when a shape actually pushed too close. No wasted rounds. Holt was lifted first, face gray, eyes too bright. Another Marine climbed aboard with blood on his hands that wasn't all his. As Madsen stepped onto the skid, he turned and stared into the tree line and saw nothing but leaves and shadow and rain, yet felt eyes on him, steady, unreadable, before the jungle swallowed them again. The Huey rose and the clearing vanished beneath green. The Australians didn't move toward the aircraft, didn't wave, didn't step into the open, simply dissolved backward into undergrowth as if they'd never been there at all. At the forward base, Raven 2 looked like they'd been dug out of the earth. Mud up to the knees, cuts everywhere, shock behind the eyes. Medics took Holt and the shoulder wound first, brisk and practiced, and that evening an after-action debrief took place in a tin-walled room under a buzzing bulb. A U.S. intel officer asking the question that mattered. How did you break contact? Madsen leaned forward, elbows on the table. We didn't, he said. Someone else broke their spine. A liaison arrived not long after, an Australian captain with calm eyes and a face that looked more farm than war, who didn't lead with rank but with simplicity. Glad you got out. Let's walk through what you saw. The Marines asked what soldiers ask when something impossible saves them. Who was out there? How close were you? How did you move without being heard? Who set the mines? And the captain answered some and let others hang like smoke. We were working the same area, he said. Heard you were in trouble. Decided the enemy had too much confidence. Madsen studied him a long moment. You saved my people. The captain didn't smile. Not charity, he said. That unit was already on our list. You were just where the knife needed to go. There was no ceremony and no speeches, only a recognition that they'd shared a piece of jungle that would follow them for years. Later, outside by sandbags where night smelled like fuel, Reyes said it quietly. I've never seen men fight by not being there. That was the Australians' method. Not louder movement, not more firepower, but absence. Silence that did work. Patience sharpened into violence at the exact second it mattered, and word traveled the way it always does in special operations. Not officially, but through muttered retellings and folded notes and small nods between men who understood. Within weeks, training cadres asked for joint sessions. Some requests were denied, some slipped through because commanders with scars know when a lesson is worth the paperwork. Back in the jungle, the Australians didn't log it as a rescue, just disruption. A pattern interrupted, a formation broken, and months later captured enemy notes hinted at the bruise left behind. Black hats do not fight like others. They watch longer than we can wait. They cut the radio first. They leave no place to aim. No medals were chased and no citations demanded. In their camp, the patrol cleaned rifles, burned trash, packed again, another insertion coming, another map to draw from mud and time, same jungle, same rain, same silence. Only now in that silence, there was a new caution on both sides about what it meant when the forest stopped echoing back. Because sometimes the deadliest thing in the green wasn't a platoon, it was 4 men who learned how to vanish and how to make other men vanish with them.